Welcome to CaCo Talks, the weekly podcast where conversations about life, hot topics, mental health, and more take center stage. We are your hosts, Catelyn and Courtney Geiger.
Together, we explore thought-provoking discussions with an ambient vibe that inspires open and honest dialogue. So sit back, relax, and join us for some insightful conversation that will leave you feeling informed and inspired.
Hi, everyone. It's Courtney here. For this week's episode, I'm going to be giving my official take on the Barbie movie. All right, so I went to go see the Barbie movie yesterday, which honestly has been highly anticipated, not only for me, but for a lot of people around the U.S. as well as around the world, honestly. So I'm glad I did get to go see it finally. I saw it on the second day of its opening. Packed theaters. The reason I had to see it in the second day, not the opening, on opening night, is because it was sold out on opening night. So, yeah, definitely made a big splash. But there's so much I just had to talk about. And I didn't have anybody directly to talk to about it. So, talked to my phone. So many ideas. I saw it late at night, too. So, by the time I got home, I was just like, let me just go to sleep. But now that I'm refreshed and it's early the next morning, I do have some ideas that I think would be worth discussing. If not with somebody else, at least with myself. Maybe I'll post this, maybe I won't. I don't know. Number one, let's get into the praises. Movie's visually stunning. Obviously, we can tell that certainly by the trailer, as well as all the promotional marketing, I hate to say schemes, but all the marketing they did for this film, they really dove into the world of Barbie. And honestly, I would say that's probably the biggest accomplishment of the film overall, is the visual kind of Barbie land, utopia world that they brought to life. They visually created and put on the big screen. Everything from the costumes to the production design to the music to, just very subtle things like the plastic food that they eat, the Barbie Dreamhouse ambulance. It doesn't open, it opens like you would open a real Barbie plastic toy ambulance. It opens horizontally, not like a regular ambulance would open. So they took careful measures, painstaking measures, I would almost say, to make Barbie Land feel like the experience of playing with the Barbie dolls. So that in itself was a major feat. They obviously had hella money, hella budget. They had Margot Robbie up there looking like Barbie, as if she does not already look like Barbie just in real life. She, her costumes, her kind of like spray painted, plastic-esque, legs, her form, everything is very Barbie. Like that woman transformed into Barbie. Same thing with Ken and all the other Barbies. They did their absolute best to transform people into this kind of heightened, utopic Barbie plastic doll land. And I think that was a feat. That was no easy task. And it required a lot of ingenuity, a lot of thought, a lot of conceptual thought too about how to actually transform how we play with Barbie dolls, or how little girls usually play with Barbie dolls, into a cinematic universe. So kudos to that. I thought that's the biggest takeaway for me for positives, for sure, as well as like the performances were really nice. And I think it's just overall it's nice to see that someone took the time to intentionally create a film that had meaning beyond its spectacle and entertainment value, and especially on such a major scale, like Barbie Movie, for sure. It is a major film released by a major studio working with Mattel, the owners, operators, makers of Barbie, and Warner Brothers. So she most definitely, she got the opportunity, Greta Gerwig, the director, and the creative team got an opportunity to really make a big splash, and that's so great and amazing for them. And they had the money to do it. So go ahead, girl. All for that. I'm trying to think what else is really positive about it. I mean, just in general, if I can just like fangirl a little bit, I love the aesthetics of Barbie. I'm like super, one part of me is like deep, thoughtful, and kind of, and like cynical and like deeply, intelligent and smart and makes thoughtful comments and considerations and conceptual things. And the other part of me is like, I really, really F with hyper femininity, like on another level. I don't know what it is, but like I really do F with Barbie and that look, and kind of like being able to be super feminine, hyper feminine almost, and still be like smart and thoughtful and intellectual and deep and concerned and a good citizen and all of that. Like that dichotomy is very interesting to me. And that's like halfway the space I feel like I personally exist in, although it's not always in the form of pink for me. But, I'll put on my hot girl outfits and then, write a biting satire at the same time, like in the same breath. Like that is very much how I like to get down. And I love that this movie really encapsulates that. Or is making like every attempt, in my opinion, to encapsulate that. And it's like on the one level, just if you look at that film, Barbie, just strictly visually, it's visually stunning. It's got everything visually in the right place, in my opinion, for the story that they are trying to tell. Now, on to the critique. What I could not help noticing, even before the film had started, even before I had like seen 1 ounce of this film or like 1 second of this film, I was looking at the people in the theater and the audience, which made me then, and considering who actually is the audience and who turned up to see this film and to see this kind of film. And what I could not help but notice is this is an overwhelmingly white film. And the audience was overwhelmingly white as a response. And that relates to, obviously, what I'm going to get into in a few seconds. But just like keep in mind that is at first I was like, oh man, I thought like every kind of person would be here, because we've all seen the Barbie marketing. Like it's reached every corner of the internet, every corner of the globe, in my opinion. That marketing team is working harder than Miss Christian or herself, okay? The original grand dame of marketing. So yeah, I expected to see more of it. I don't want to say diverse, but I expected to see certainly more people of color and Black people specifically. And I did not see that. It was very much millennial age, white women, kind of women you would associate with like girl boss culture. And we'll get into that later. But and I thought about it and I was like, it makes sense, because the director herself, to me, and I've always held this belief, always said this about Greta Gerwig, and this is no shade, this is just the truth. Greta Gerwig is a white, millennial, feminist woman, girl boss type woman. Okay, that's the space she fills up. And a lot of people, I think, or I've heard people be like, she speaks for us all. She's so revolutionary. She's so blah, 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 blah. And I am not taking anything away from her creative endeavors and the things that she's done, because I think she's done good work. I really do. I think even great work. But I think the space she exists in is a limited space strictly because of her own identity. Like, I think her identity is a millennial aged white woman. And I think that is not lost and should not be lost on anybody who's watching this film. Like that is the voice that this film is coming out of, right? And if you think about a millennial aged white woman, they would have been the type of women who, as children, little girls, had not only played with Barbie dolls, but like reveled in that kind of culture, that sort of like white aspirational feminism culture. That is their MO bread and butter. That is their one point of oppression, if we can make that kind of analogy, you know? And so obviously I'm a Black woman. So walking, just like I was saying, walking into the room, I was like, okay, this is the audience. And this, which to be fair, to be perfectly honest, I was not expecting. I was expecting to see a lot more people of color, but specifically more Black people. I thought that this film, honestly, and I don't know why I thought this, because like I said, I know who the director is, and I know Greta Gerwig, and I've seen her, and I've always held that belief. But I for some reason, I thought, based on of social media, I guess, more Black people would be there. I don't know. I thought this was, even felt like it was trying to be marketed towards all people, and really it ended up being something very much for the honestly, the white girls. So understand that is the kind of the background for the audience, which I think says something about the film. You know, that's what I try to pay attention to now, not just what is happening on screen, but who's watching and who is this marketed to and who showed up for it. That's also a part of the film, in my opinion. Certainly a part of the marketing schemes. Anyways, so that's the backdrop. I would say something that all Black people, all Black women know too well is you're hyper aware of yourself in certain spaces. So that's why I noted that I was in a room full of white people and white women specifically, and millennial age white women specifically. Because again, I'm always walking around aware of myself as the other. And so when I walk into certain rooms and I'm like, this feels very white, you know, I have to, then you do that just as a protection mechanism, because you're like, well, you know what, if this room is full of white people, I have to like armor myself in certain ways, or like prepare myself in certain ways for like whatever interactions might come out of this. So that's why I'm just like hyper vigilant anyways, just as a Black woman walking around the world, and even more so in those kinds of spaces where I'm like, I for sure am not only my minority, I'm one of the only, you know, not an uncommon experience. It's just an experience that I'm aware of it. And I became acutely aware of it last night because there were so many who fit that bill there. There were other women of color I noticed, but it was not Black people. It was like either Latino women or like Asian women or Indian women, minority groups, I think, who have a proximity to whiteness and acceptability in whiteness that Black women do not necessarily have on that scale. It's like, if we're looking at, I hate to say it's looking at skin color as a scale, like it went from like the white women to, which is the majority, and then the to like Asian women, to like you just keep getting darker and darker skin tone on the scale till you get to like me and one other Black woman who I saw in the theater. So yeah, that's something to definitely note and to be like, to know about this film, is who the audience is and who showed up as the audience. And everybody showed up in pink. All right. Various shades of pink in their little like Barbie-esque outfits, which I thought was cute. It was like, you know, fandom kind of thing. But yeah, now on to the movie and my specific critiques about it. We already talked about the visual spectacle, which was nice. I think where this movie really, really falters the biggest is being way too preachy and like on the nose. I'm going to be honest. It felt very much like they relied on like existential epiphanies to discuss feminism. In a way, as just like a filmmaker that I think is a little convenient, and I don't want to say lazy, but borderline lazy. Because it's like the Barbies kind of have these like, oh, now I know what feminism is and why we should be fighting for feminism, and we can't let the men rule, and patriarchy is bad. It's like these kind of like random revelations they have that I think is not necessarily realistic, or it takes out the potential for the character to learn themselves when the filmmaker kind of inserts epiphany type moments. Epiphanies aren't always horrible to have in, but I think they should be kind of spare and reserved. The character should evolve. And I think they had like one too many preachy epiphany type moments. Like I can think of like 4 or 5-ish epiphany type moments. And like, I think as a filmmaker, you should definitely have 2 on the nose epiphanies / potential monologues where you're like really discussing the theme directly to the audience, max. That's, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And I felt like they did that just one too many times in this film. And I think Greta Gerwig is like smart enough to and skilled enough to not rely on that. So I guess that's kind of where it falls for me. But then again, I do think this is the first time I've ever seen a satire from her. Most of her films are just kind of like character studies about women, about white women. So maybe that's the kick. I don't know. I think maybe that's just something she has never explored. And so her first time doing satire, she kind of like relies on those convenient, narrative tools, I guess, to get her points across. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so too many epiphanies, and and then the epiphanies themselves were very like tied to feminism, and I just think there's so many complexities surrounding feminism that having an epiphany really waters it down, in some ways. And then not to mention, I think the whole time I was thinking, I was like, does Barbie have epiphanies? Like when I think about the character of Barbie, either the plastic doll or Barbie in, films and kind of the iconic type fictional character that she has become, I don't know that Barbie has epiphanies. Like, I'm not sure she has those kinds of sudden revelations about reality. And maybe that's the humor that Greta Gerwig is trying to bring out. I don't know, or that was her method of humor, was like, oh, they're these little plastic dolls who are supposed to be kind of mindless and just like hyper feminine and not thinking at all, have these incredibly deep, sudden revelations about patriarchy, the world, and how it works and all of that. I don't know. If that was the case, I think that sense of humor could have been maybe not explained more, but sort of constructed more fluidly, I guess. I don't know. I have a hard time thinking Barbie just kind of like wakes up one day in perfect dreamland and then like is suddenly like contemplating her own existence. Like, have you guys ever had thoughts about death? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And I know it ended up being, she was kind of like tethered to a human in the real world who started having those thoughts. But even that felt kind of like, well, why is she having those thoughts about death? Or why is the human having these thoughts about, cellulite and like not coming back, or like this existential crisis? I don't know. They just kind of skated over, I guess, the why and the how of that. I don't know. Yeah. So that epiphanies felt very fake. I mean, and maybe that's part of the point, because Barbie is fake. So yeah, that's something I wouldn't personally. That's not just something as a filmmaker. That's not something I would try to rely on. I think really good satires don't necessarily have to be just like subtle, but I think that they do. They rely on the characters learning about whatever they're critiquing, not just suddenly realizing it, I think, And then it incorporated like feminist monologues about like how women are subjugated in the real world to men, either in romantic relationships or how you're like supposed to behave and kind of like what it means to like be a woman. Yeah, so I think, it had some of those moments, which I think is like, if you are someone who is anti-patriarchal or feminist or has had any kind of critical thought about gender and gender roles, like you already know that what is expected of women and then how the world pressures women. So that felt kind of redundant to me. Maybe that's because I'm just already exist in that space. I already know about that. So that didn't really like reveal anything to me. If anything, it just kind of reiterated, I guess, what I already knew. So that didn't feel fresh to me. It felt more like, I mean, maybe to somebody who's not a critical thinker, maybe that's a fresh idea to them. But I feel like even I feel like even men in the patriarchy know what is expected of women. They are the ones who carry out and enact those social pressures the most. So I don't think it's that they are unaware. Ignore my neighbor's dog. Anyways, yeah. So I don't feel like that was a new revelation. Like that has been kind of in the cultural psyche for a while about like how women are expected to perform in male spaces in a patriarchy. Like can't be too loud, speak up, but don't be too loud. That kind of stuff. Don't threaten men or threaten other people, kind of thing. Be a mother, see motherhood as your ultimate, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's stuff. Honestly, I feel like we already know. Like, that's not a new, fresh take on something. We already know that is how women are controlled or tend to be controlled in a patriarchy. So I would have liked to see a little more different take on like feminism, I guess. Like thematically what she's trying to assert with this film. I would have liked to have seen something that felt a little more fresh than just like, don't control women, patriarchy is bad. Like, yes. And, you know what I mean? Like, how can we look at patriarchy differently to understand what is bad about it or how it's specifically oppressive to women, like that sort of thing. So that said, that gets into, honestly, my major point. After 22 minutes, that gets into sort of my major point. I think my biggest critique, I guess, or like the biggest, I guess, shortcoming, which isn't quite a shortcoming. It's like, I should have known because of the director herself, as well as the theme, and then the character they're trying to portray. This is a white feminist film. Okay. And it directly shows, more than other types of films that I've seen, or feminist critiques, why people have issues with white feminism. Here's why. This is coming from a Black woman. This is also coming from a filmmaker. This is coming from somebody who believes in intersectional feminism and all of that. So this is what the Barbie movie and the audience and the writer-director and the whole kind of the whole like universe they have created represents. All right. It inherently ignores and does not, it's not rooted in the experiences of anybody else but a white woman. Hear me out. So let's think about Barbie. Barbie is aspirational. That's always what Barbie's been about. Barbie's been about, as a woman, you can go and achieve XYZ. You can be an astronaut. You can be an accountant. You can be a movie star. You can be a doctor. You can be a lawyer. You can be a mother. You can be a good friend. You can be a good girlfriend. You can be wealthy. You can have a mansion. You can have a car. You can have all these things. And again, what are all these things rooted in? Aspirations, life, goals, a career, building a lifestyle, an independent lifestyle for women. And what I think is interesting about this and how Barbie directly relates to white women is white feminism has always been for and about white women's aspirations, right? Because on the hierarchy, white women exist just one step away from being white men. And a lot of how they have viewed their own oppression has been in relationship to, obviously, white men, right? Versus someone like a Black woman who is 2, 3, 4, 5 steps down the line from a white man, you know? So their kind of way of usurping power or gaining power has always been to do what the men do or have access to what the men have, which is things like careers, the freedom and agency to move among careers, to own homes, to own cars, to have wealth, to have influence and power. And I think that's where my biggest critique of this film comes into play that's what white feminism has historically been about and has historically excluded people of color and is essentially Barbie is a role reversal and therefore a way that white women just take on the power and status that white men take on. Not necessarily changing things for equity among all people, but just taking the power into their own hands. Meaning, when they take on the power, they take on the status of what a white man was previously. They are also taking on the role of oppressor in that space. Go with me, okay? So, or stick with me. And that's why things like intersectional feminism or like things even like womanism or like when you get into people like Bell Hooks and Kimberly Crenshaw, who are thinking about how Black women fit into a, quote, feminist, anti-patriarchal, anti-capitalist space, then you get into, it's not aspirational. It's not. It's like as Black women, a lot of our, we have not had the privilege of aspiring to anything because we've always had to work. You know what I'm saying? So feminism for us hasn't been about, let me infiltrate and enter the spaces that men previously occupied. A lot of feminism for Black women has always been about, honestly, what's radical about Black feminism is rest. Being able to not work has always been a radical concept. Being able to be seen, acknowledged, and respected for your culture in certain spaces, as well as in some ways being able to be aspirational and to achieve the life that you want. But that has nuances too, because as a Black woman, you stepping into leadership positions is always mistrusted and or racialized as like, well, you're a Black person, so we don't know if we can trust your, viewpoint or your opinion or whatever the fuck white people say. And then I also think Black intersectional feminism has always been about how race specifically informs a woman's experience. I'm not just a woman, I am a Black woman, So my experiences are inherently racialized. Like I said, when I walked into that theater, I became acutely aware of myself as a Black person in that space. I'm not like the white women. I'm not girl boss and my little pink shorts and like that sort of thing. Like there's a respect that is given to white women as the default of what a woman is. That is not given to Black and brown women in the same way, especially Black women, And I think that's what the Barbie movie is inherently leaves out, which makes sense that it would be left out because, like I said, the filmmaker herself is white and represents, in my opinion, white millennial woman feminism, which kind of has blinders and has blind spots when it comes to feminism. You know, they tout it as like this feminism for all, and it's like, actually it's for white women. And which is not actually a new argument. People have been saying this stuff since like the 60s and 70s that like, you know, like it's like Gloria Steinem versus Bell Hooks. Like, I don't say versus, but their ideas of feminism are very different. And it's rooted in identity and the differences in their identity, you know? So I think that was a major thing that was missing is that, which I hate to say this, but I couldn't expect that Greta Gerwig, whose only scope is as a millennial white woman, to really look at the nuance of what this would mean for a Black woman watching or a Black audience watching, which there appears to not really be a Black audience, to be honest. Now I'm thinking about it. If my theater is a microcosm for the rest of the country and the rest of the theaters, then like there probably ain't too many Black people even in theaters in the first place. So maybe it isn't a Black film. But I still wanted to see it because I'm like, just as a filmmaker, I wanted to see how they were going to do this satire. And I wanted to see if it was going to be a really well done satire or not. But yeah, they were missing. I could tell they did not go into this film thinking about any other experience other than a white Barbie doll. Not really thinking about that experience and thinking about what it's rooted in. They were thinking specifically about what Barbie represents to white women, white girls. And obviously that's a shortcoming for me and for women of color, and why I guess it probably doesn't appeal as much to women of color, because we don't see Barbie is not for us. No matter how many Black Barbies and multicultural Barbies you want to put on, in the cultural psyche, Barbie has historically and will always be white. Always. And, you know, as a little girl, we had Barbie dolls. I had white Barbie dolls. And then I want to say I had Black Barbie dolls. I can't remember if I did. I know I had white Barbie dolls. And we had a Barbie dream house and a little Barbie car. So, you know, we get the messaging very early on that Barbie is not only white, she exists in a white world and she exists in a white space, and she is aspirational for white people, which kind of, in our minds as children, it reinforces the idea that whiteness is the only way to achieve. Whiteness is the only way to aspire to, or you have to aspire. If you aspire in life, you got to sort of acquiesce to whiteness. That's the messaging that we get early on. We don't see the same thing when we're playing with Barbie dolls. We don't just see, oh, I can be an astronaut now, or I can be a doctor now, I can be a lawyer now. You know, even if it is wrapped up in a black-skinned Barbie doll, we know that this institution itself is white, and that really they're only sort of diversifying as a way to like make more money and reach out to, or respond to criticism, or reach out to different audiences. So no matter how many Black Barbie dolls they make, how many diverse Barbie dolls they make, the institution itself is white. Okay, it's like when we go to jobs and they're like, we have a diversity and inclusion officer who is Black. It's like, this institution itself is still focused on and propagating whiteness, white culture, I don't know if there's white culture, but white ideologies. Okay, this is by and in the hopes of propagating white people. So Barbie does not have the cultural weight for Black women. And I wish she would have paid a little more attention to that, because I feel like she just kind of like assumed that Barbie has the same cultural weight for all little girls, for all women. And reality is it doesn't. When I look at a Barbie doll, I don't see anything to necessarily aspire to. You know, I see this little like plastic figurine, honestly, that we played with as children. And as kids, we weren't aware, we were just playing. But that also seeped into my own psyche as like what what having an idyllic life was like. And it was encased in a white woman's body. So that itself is already a powerful message that is being transferred to little girls, you know. And I think that image that was not addressed at all in this film. And if it had been addressed, I'm going to be honest, I don't think Greta Gerwig is the one to address it. Because I just don't see her having the experience or the nuance to make that argument very clear. You know? So, yeah, that's what I think is definitely missing. This is definitely it's really a show and a visual spectacle for white feminism in a nutshell. In a big millennial age Barbie doll, plastic encased Barbie land nutshell. You know, that's really what I walked away from this film feeling. And I think had she paid a little more attention to intersectional feminism or what this doll represents to non-white women, I actually think some of the points wouldn't have been so didactic and kind of preachy and like in your face. I think she could have gotten into nuance a little bit more. I think, but maybe that's just how I think. I personally think about things because I don't think that you got to rely on, like I said, epiphany and preachings to get a point across in satire. So that's just me. You know, it's kind of like, now I'm thinking about it, the closest example I can think is like if you've ever read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, like what those little white dolls do to Black women is something that this film totally and inexplicably missed. And in my opinion, made no attempt to even address. That Barbie is as much as aspirational as she is to one group of people, she's as oppressive to another group of people. I should say that, you know, because like the thing about In the Blue Side, Pecola, Breedlove, all she wants is blonde hair and blue eyes. Because she sees that blonde hair and blue eyes is what would make her beautiful, quote, beautiful in this world and desirable. And then if she was desirable, people would not hurt her the way that they would, which is obviously flawed thinking and it's childlike and it's sad and hopeless, really. But for little Black girls, that's what we see when we see Barbie. Even the dark-skinned Black ones, because it's coming out of that white institution. We don't just see, oh, I can be this, I can be that, I can achieve this, achieve that. Because this doll is in our own image. This doll was not created for us. It was not created of our own image. It's more often been used as a tool of oppression for little Black girls. You know, and I just think that, you know, again, I hesitate to say Greta Gerwig, that concept is lost on someone like Greta Gerwig, because I'm not saying that she is just unaware. I don't know her personally, but I do know that cinematically, it was lost. It did not show up at all. Which I think is what would make this film not appealing to Black women. Like I really sat in the theater and thought, I was like, why is this room all white? Like, I don't know why I expect to see just more people of color, specifically Black women. And then I watched the film and really thought about like what it's representing and what Barbie represents and has represented in the cultural zeitgeist. And truth is, Barbie has excluded, as aspirational as she has been, she has excluded just as many, if not more, people and little girls. My relationship to Barbie is very different than Sarah's. You know what I mean? So, yeah. That's what I think. Because truth is, for Black girls, you know, sometimes Barbie is the first image you've seen where you see the straight, long, blonde hair and the blue eyes and the thin figure and the this and the that. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen for white women, because it does happen for them too, especially around like, you know, we think about body, about like body shaming and all of that, like, and body image, like that's definitely there. But then you wrap it up in this kind of like aspirational, like, this is who you should be. This is who you should aim to be. It does feel very girl boss, and like, you know, and there's obviously critiques of people who exist in that world too, which is normally millennial age white women. And I want to be careful to say millennial age because I think Gen Z, they try to like have a Gen Z moment in the film too, which I thought was really pointed. And actually, that was one of the more exact satirical moments I thought in the film. That was very, that felt very pointed because the Gen Z girls got it immediately. They're like, you don't represent us. You're a doll. You are very problematic, you know? Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, maybe that was her attempt to like bring those ideas up, but there's just deep complexities, I think, to Barbie that go beyond what she could obviously represent in a film. And maybe she did what she could do, and she had to like focus on the white feminist angle of it just so it could be made and like that sort of thing. I don't know. But yeah, that's what I came away with. It cemented for me that Barbie is actually just white feminism, which is missing, obviously, the nuance for people of color. And it makes sense that Greta Gerwig would make it. Because had a black filmmaker made it, first of all, I don't think a black woman would have even, if you would have been tasked with making like a satirical movie about a doll, I don't know if it would have been Barbie for a black woman. Because just culturally, that's not where Barbie sits for us. You know, I don't know. So yeah, that was my major walk away. Oh, and also, okay, last thing I'll end on. We already discussed how I thought the epiphanies were weird, or it was too many epiphanies, and how this film really represents white feminism collectively in totality, and then millennial age white feminism, like I was saying, girl boss mentality, which can also be toxic, and we see those. Okay, I want to say something else about that. I think what bothers people about the girl boss and millennial age white women is these are the same women who, like I was saying, they try to usurp male power. So when they are in positions of power, they are girl bosses. They often use the tools of oppression that they just usurped to use against people of color. And that's why people really don't F with girl bosses and white women in certain spaces. That's what a Karen is, basically. I think. And then they use these systems or their place in the hierarchy and their narratives, like a Karen would, to weaponize against people lower on the spectrum, people of color. So I think that's where a lot of people get off with girl bosses, or a lot of people of color get off with the like girl boss mentality. It's because we don't see girl bosses as safe or somehow better. You're just a woman enacting these oppressions versus a man. So there. The last thing I will say too is another good thing I thought that they did, which did feel kind of accurate, is kind of how they had Ken. Once Ken learns about patriarchy, he goes back into Barbie Land and then starts like enacting patriarchy. Or like forces everyone to be patriarchal or whatever. Or he reinstates Barbie Land as like kingdom. And I thought how Ryan Gosling played that, as well as how how he like took patriarchy and like, and like he couldn't quite figure out like how the nuances of patriarchy. He just kind of like was like, men rule the world. Okay, we're gonna go back to Barbie Land and make men in charge. I think that was I thought it was smart how they played that, simply because I think the nature of patriarchy is kind of like macho doofuses. Like that's how Ryan Gosling plays it. Like he doesn't really he's just strictly performing masculinity for the sake of being masculine, just as like a, look, I'm a man kind of thing, you know? And I think in the real world, I'm going to be honest, that did not feel like much of a stretch, because that's what a lot of men do. They just perform these kind of stereotypical ideas about what masculinity is, what being a man is, and think that that itself is going to like get them some status or kudos or like get them access to women or whatever. Like, they would do the most, honestly, asinine, performative, machismo type things, you know, to like be a man. And I thought that felt accurate, as like silly and absurd as it looked on screen. I was like, honestly, you can find a dude outside right now trying to puff out his chest to like try to impress women, like, or be like, hand me a beer or make me a sandwich. Like, dudes really say shit like that, and it's the sad truth. So that felt accurate to me. I do think the only thing that was kind of confusing was the end. Like, I thought the resolution of the film just felt very rushed and kind of, they didn't tie up every loose end, in my opinion. Like, in the end, you know, Barbie leaves Barbie Land because she wants to like be human and experience the human world. And in the very end, she ends up going to like a gyno's office. And I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out that joke and like what's funny about that. And maybe I'll think about it later. But, you know, and then they have this whole like, they don't, another shortcoming. Once Barbie Land is restored, like Ken is kicked out, patriarchy ends, you know, and the Barbies, the women are firmly put back in their place and all is restored. Women rule, right? Ken has more of an existential crisis, like breakdown. And I don't understand the way that Barbie like fixes it, I guess, is her to be like, you have to discover who you are, Ken. Who are you, Ken? You have to discover yourself. And I just think that's a really oversimplified, almost dangerously oversimplified way of like fixing the male issue, because there is a real issue that men have, you know, and I'm always critiquing men in the patriarchy, but there is a real issue in identity displacement that I think a lot of men have, and the way to fix that isn't just being like, well, figure yourself out. Just figure out who you are. No. A lot of men need to actively decenter patriarchy from their lives and actively go about therapy and actively go about supporting the women in their lives and understanding, you know, and breaking down these kind of like machismo patriarchal norms of what it means to be a man. And that's a lot deeper and a lot more complex than just figure out who you are. Because, like, he could be like, oh, well, I'm a biker now, or I'm a police officer now, or I'm a this now, or whatever. Like, it's too simplistic. I thought that was way too simplistic and way too simplistic for what the goals of the film were, you know. Because in the real world, a major issue that we're coming upon now is because women are so, have made so many advancements, and women are in positions of power, and women are taking care of themselves, and most women are independent and do not rely on men, you know, for like needs, for a lifestyle. A lot of men are feeling very lost. I'm not sympathizing with them. I'm just saying they feel lost and like misplaced, and they feel like, quote, masculinity is in crisis, but really it's not like masculinity itself is in crisis. It's more like they're experiencing what it feels like to not be centered anymore. That could have been that's a stronger point of critique to me, and a more nuanced, accurate point of critique than just saying, figure yourself out, Ken. Like, figure out what? Ken needs to decenter patriarchy. That's what he really needs to do. And that's what a lot of men need to do in order to continue and have happy, healthy relationships and lives for themselves. So, yeah, it was definitely missing that. And then, like, you can get into corporate America, too. They tried to, like, do that in there, too. But that was really muddled to me. Like, I have totally formed ideas about that. Yeah, it was very muddled. And Mattel just seemed to kind of like at one point they were misogynist, and then another point they were like, yeah, Barbie, you go, girl. So I don't know. Oh, and last thing I will say is this another point back to the feminism thing. I think they tried to be like, well, we're multicultural. They had like Barbies who were not super slim. They had Barbies with disabilities. They had Barbies who were mothers. They had Black Barbies. They had, mixed race Barbies. They had, different types of Barbies. And, but again, that feels sort of like performative diversity, because it's like, oh, we slapped different types of people in here. We're diverse now. Let's get back to Barbie, stereotypical Barbie, white Barbie story, tired, lame, seen it, been there, done that, been the token for that, So anyway, I do recommend seeing it. I do think visually, like I said, it's spectacle. I think it should be awarded actually for the spectacle that it is and the attention and detail they put into that. I would say that's actually the biggest takeaway is the spectacle of it all, as well as some of the dance numbers. They try to get into like musicals with it. And then, some of the performances. I think thematically it got a little muddled, and I think execution of those themes was particularly muddled. But again, I hate to say this, because of Greta Gerwig's like identity and status, I don't know if she could have done anything better with it, because of like, as a director, she is really looking at this through a white woman millennial lens. Like, it was written out of that scope. So I'm not sure that she would have, if we're looking for the nuance of intersectional feminism and, and how this affects people of color and maybe even people with disabilities and this and that, like we're not going to get that, because that is not the voice that wrote this, But I thought Margot Robbie looked great. I always think Margot Robbie looks great. I've always admired her performances. I really think, to me, she's like one of the leading actresses in working today, with her range and her, honestly, her acting skills. So, yeah, I don't know. Go see Barbie. I think it's cute. If not just for all the pink and plastic. Thank you so much for listening to my take on the Barbie movie. I hope you enjoyed and maybe, learn a little something. But don't forget, I'll be joined by Catelyn next week for a brand new episode of CaCo Talks. Bye, everybody.